Victoria Hayes had always believed in the power of hard work. At 26 years old, she stood as one of the youngest senior financial analysts at Montgomery Industries, a technology conglomerate worth billions. Her small apartment across the city was modest, filled with financial journals and half-drunk cups of coffee, evidence of countless late nights spent perfecting her craft. She loved the challenge of numbers, the satisfaction of finding patterns where others saw chaos. Every morning, Victoria arrived at the sleek headquarters building before sunrise. Watching the city wake up through floor-to-ceiling windows, her colleagues respected her meticulous attention to detail. Her reports had saved the company millions in potential losses. She had earned her place at that table, and she knew it. What she did not know was how quickly everything could crumble. Julian Montgomery commanded every room he entered. At 32, he had transformed his father's modest software company into a global empire. Tall and striking, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes, he possessed an intensity that made people either admire or fear him. Victoria had always kept her distance, maintaining strict professionalism despite the undeniable tension that crackled between them during late-night strategy meetings. The merger with TechVision Corporation was supposed to be Julian's crowning achievement. Victoria had been assigned to lead the financial due diligence, an honor that made her parents beam with pride when she called them. For 6 weeks, she buried herself in documents, analyzing every aspect of the deal. Then she found it buried deep in the subsidiary agreements, a clause that would expose Montgomery Industries to unlimited liability for TechVision's previous debts. The betrayal of Victoria immediately reported her findings to Gregory Walsh, the chief financial officer and her direct supervisor. Gregory, a silver-haired man who had been with the company for 15 years, assured her he would handle it personally. He praised her thoroughness and promised to brief Julian before the final signing meeting. Victoria trusted him completely. The signing ceremony took place in the grand conference room on the 40th floor. Executives from both companies filled the space, champagne ready for the celebration. Victoria sat near the back, her stomach churning with anxiety. She had double-checked her report 3 times, but something felt wrong. Gregory had been oddly dismissive when she tried to follow up, when the TechVision CEO pointed out the liability clause with a smug smile. The room froze. The silence was deafening. Victoria watched in horror as Julian's expression shifted from confidence to fury. His blue eyes scanned the room like a predator seeking prey, and then they locked onto her. "Miss Hayes?" His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You led this analysis. Stand up." Victoria's legs trembled as she rose. Every eye in the room turned toward her. Her mouth went dry. "Can you explain to me, to everyone here, how you missed a clause that could cost this company $300 million? Julian's voice was dangerously calm, each word precisely delivered. "Sir, I did not miss it. I reported it to Mr. Walsh over a month ago. It's documented in my full report, submitted on the enough." Julian's palm slammed against the mahogany table. "I have heard enough excuses to last a lifetime. In my company, we take responsibility for our failures. We do not blame others." Gregory Walsh sat frozen in his chair, his face pale, but his eyes cold. He said nothing. He did not defend her. He simply watched as her world collapsed. Julian moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "You are not just incompetent, Miss Hayes. You are dangerous. Someone who cannot communicate critical information effectively has no place in a position of responsibility. You have embarrassed this company, cost us an extraordinary amount of money, and wasted months of work." Victoria felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Mr. Montgomery, please, if you would just look at my original report, security." Julian interrupted, not even looking at her anymore. "Escort Miss Hayes from the building. She is terminated immediately." The humiliation was absolute. 2 security guards appeared at her sides, their expressions neutral, but their presence damning. They walked her through the office floor as colleagues whispered and stared. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked relieved it was not them. Gregory Walsh remained in the conference room, already moving on to damage control. Victoria packed her belongings into a cardboard box with shaking hands. A photo of her late parents, a small cactus plant, her favorite mug with a quote about perseverance. The irony was not lost on her. As she was escorted toward the elevator, she passed Julian's office. Through the glass wall, she could see him on the phone, his back to her, gesturing angrily. He never looked her way. Starting over at the weeks that followed, blurred together in a haze of rejection and despair. Victoria applied to every finance position she could find, but word traveled fast in the industry. She was the analyst who cost Montgomery Industries hundreds of millions. No one would touch her. Her savings dwindled rapidly as rent and bills piled up. When the eviction notice arrived, Victoria sat on her apartment floor and cried for the first time since the firing. She had lost everything: her career, her reputation, her future. The dreams she had built so carefully were ashes. Desperation led her to a small bookstore cafe called Chapter and Brew in a quiet neighborhood far from the financial district. The owner, Martha Chen, a warm woman in her 50s with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands, hired her on the spot. "You look like you could use a fresh start," Martha said simply. The work was nothing like her previous life. Victoria learned to steam milk, recommend novels, and clean tables. Her hands, once flying across keyboards calculating complex financial models, now wiped down counters and shelved books. The pay barely covered her tiny studio apartment. But the peaceful atmosphere slowly began to heal something broken inside her. Thomas Bennett first came into the cafe on a rainy afternoon, 3 months after Victoria started working there. He was an architect with a gentle smile and warm brown eyes that crinkled when he laughed. He ordered a simple black coffee and sat by the window, sketching building designs in a worn notebook. Over the following weeks, Thomas became a regular. Their conversation started with small talk about the weather and books, then gradually deepened. He told her about his work designing community centers for underprivileged neighborhoods. She carefully shared pieces of her past, leaving out the painful details. Thomas never pushed for more than she was willing to give. "You have sad eyes," he told her one evening as she refilled his coffee, "but also strong ones. Whatever you've been through, you're surviving it." His words touched something deep within her. For the first time in months, Victoria smiled genuinely. Maybe survival was enough for now. Maybe she could build a new life from these small moments. She had no idea that her past was about to collide with her present in the most unexpected way. Victoria woke up feeling wrong. Her small studio apartment spun slightly as she sat up, and a wave of nausea rolled through her stomach. She attributed it to the stress of her new life, the irregular meals, the exhaustion of working double shifts to make rent. For 3 weeks, she had been feeling off, tired in a way that sleep could not fix, emotional over the smallest things. That morning, as she prepared for her shift at Chapter and Brew, the smell of coffee, once comforting, made her stomach revolt. She barely made it to the bathroom before getting sick. Martha noticed immediately when Victoria arrived at work, her face pale and drawn. "Child, you look terrible," Martha said, pressing a cool hand to Victoria's forehead. "No fever, but something is definitely wrong. When was your last checkup?" Victoria could not remember. Healthcare had become a luxury she could barely afford. Martha insisted she take the afternoon off and visit the free clinic 2 blocks away. Too exhausted to argue, Victoria agreed. The clinic was crowded and impersonal, but the nurse practitioner was kind. After a basic examination and some questions, she handed Victoria a small plastic cup. "Let's rule out the obvious first," she said with a knowing smile. Victoria sat in the waiting room, her mind blank. The possibility had not even occurred to her. But as she counted back the weeks, her heart began to pound. That night with Julian, the company's celebration where champagne had flowed too freely, where the tension between them had finally exploded into something neither could control. It had been one night, one mistake she had tried desperately to forget. When the nurse called her back, her expression confirmed everything. "Congratulations, you're about 8 weeks pregnant." The world tilted. Victoria gripped the examination table, unable to breathe. Pregnant, with Julian Montgomery's child. The man who had destroyed her life, who had humiliated her in front of dozens of people, would never once try to reach out or apologize. The father of her baby did not even know she existed anymore. Living with the secret, Victoria walked home in a daze. The positive test results folded in her pocket. She sat on her worn couch, staring at the peeling paint on the ceiling, trying to process the impossible situation. She had no money for prenatal care, no support system, no plan. Her parents were gone. Her friends from her old life had abandoned her. She was utterly alone. Except she was not. Not anymore. There was a tiny life growing inside her, depending on her completely. The next morning, Victoria returned to work determined to push forward. She would figure this out somehow. Martha took one look at her face and pulled her into the back room. What did the doctor say? Victoria broke down. The whole story poured out. The affair with her boss, the firing, and now the pregnancy. Martha listened without judgment, then wrapped Victoria in a fierce hug. You are stronger than you know, sweetheart. And you are not alone. We will figure this out together. True to her word, Martha adjusted Victoria's schedule, giving her longer breaks and easier tasks. She brought in homemade ginger tea for the morning sickness and slipped extra money into Victoria's paycheck, calling it hazard pay for dealing with difficult customers. Thomas noticed the changes immediately. Victoria had been careful around him, keeping their friendship light despite the growing affection she felt. But her body was changing, and her emotions were a roller coaster. One afternoon, he found her crying in the stockroom over a damaged book. Victoria, what's going on? He knelt beside her, genuine concern etched across his face. You have not been yourself lately. Please, talk to me. She wanted to lie, to protect him from her complicated mess. But the kindness in his eyes broke through her defenses. I'm pregnant, she whispered. The father does not know. He's not in my life anymore. I'm doing this alone. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he took her hand gently. You do not have to be alone. I care about you, Victoria. More than you probably realize. It's a growing connection over the following weeks. Thomas became Victoria's lifeline. He showed up at the cafe every day, bringing her crackers for the nausea, books about pregnancy, small gifts that made her smile. He never pushed for more information about the father, never judged her situation. He simply showed up, consistently and kindly, one evening. As they walked through the park near her apartment, Thomas stopped beneath a streetlight. The autumn leaves swirled around them in shades of gold and red. Victoria, I need to tell you something, and I do not want you to feel pressured, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. Her heart raced as she looked up at him. I am falling in love with you, he said softly. I know your situation is complicated. I know you are carrying another man's child, but I do not care. I see you, the real you, and I think you are extraordinary. I want to be there for you, for both of you, if you will let me. Tears streamed down Victoria's face. Here was this wonderful man, offering her everything Julian had denied. Respect, support, genuine affection. Thomas, I do not know what to say. You deserve someone without all this baggage. I deserve someone real, he countered, cupping her face gently. Someone brave and strong and beautiful, inside and out. That is you, Victoria. That has always been you. She let him kiss her, a tender connection that felt nothing like the passionate collision with Julian. This was softer, safer, filled with promise rather than regret. Maybe she could build something real with Thomas. Maybe the baby could have a father who actually wanted to be present. But late at night, alone in her apartment, guilt gnawed at her. Julian did not know he was going to be a father. Whatever he had done to her, did he not have a right to know? She wrestled with the question endlessly, her hand resting on her growing belly. The near Miss Victoria was 5 months along when it happened. Her pregnancy was becoming visible despite her loose clothing. Martha had moved her to mostly backroom tasks to avoid curious stares from customers. But that afternoon, they were short-staffed. And Victoria had to work the front counter. She was restocking pastries when she heard a familiar voice that made her blood freeze. Through the display case, she saw him. Julian Montgomery stood in line, his phone pressed to his ear, looking as commanding and untouchable as ever. He wore an expensive suit and an expression of intense concentration. Victoria ducked behind the counter, her heart hammering. What was he doing here? This neighborhood was nowhere near his usual haunts. Martha appeared beside her, taking in the situation instantly. Go to the back now. I will handle this. Victoria fled to the stockroom, pressing her back against the wall, trying to control her breathing. Through the crack in the door, she could hear Martha taking his order, her voice professionally pleasant. Julian said something about a meeting nearby, needing caffeine. His tone was clipped, distracted. Then his voice changed. This cafe, it is charming. Reminds me of something more authentic than the corporate chains. Thank you, Martha replied. We try to keep it personal here. Treat our employees like family. There was a pause. Family, that must be nice. I have been told I lack that quality in my business approach. Victoria's hands trembled. Was that regret she heard in his voice? Martha completed the transaction, and finally she heard the door chime as he left. She emerged from the stockroom, shaking. That was him, she whispered. The father, my former boss. Martha's eyes widened. That was Julian Montgomery? Good Lord, child. No wonder you ran. That night, Victoria could not sleep. Seeing Julian had stirred up everything she had tried to bury, the anger at her unjust firing, the pain of his cruel words, but also the memory of that one night when he had been different, vulnerable, almost human. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. This child was half him, whether she liked it or not. Thomas came over the next evening with takeout and found her staring at her laptop. Julian's company website pulled up on the screen. What are you doing? He asked carefully. I saw him yesterday, Victoria admitted. The father. He came into the cafe. I hid, but seeing him made me realize something. This baby deserves to know their father, even if he is a terrible person. Even if he hurt me. I have been selfish, keeping this secret. Thomas set down the food and sat beside her. Victoria, you are not selfish. You are protecting yourself and your child. If he is as bad as you say, maybe it is better this way. But what if I am wrong? Her voice broke. What if he deserves a chance to step up? What if my baby grows up and hates me for keeping them apart? Then we cross that bridge when we come to it, Thomas said firmly. Right now, you need to focus on staying healthy. The rest can wait. But Victoria knew it could not wait forever. The secret was growing inside her, literally, and soon everyone would know. The question was not if Julian would find out, but when and how. As she felt another kick from the baby, she realized that the truth had a way of revealing itself. Whether you were ready or not, her peaceful new life was about to shatter once again. And this time, there would be no escaping the consequences. Julian Montgomery sat in his office long after everyone else had gone home, staring at the financial reports spread across his desk. 6 months had passed since the Tech Vision disaster, and something still felt wrong. The company had recovered from the immediate crisis, but Julian could not shake the nagging feeling that he had missed something crucial. He had built his empire on instinct and attention to detail. Yet lately his instincts screamed that he had made a terrible mistake. Not about the merger, but about something far more personal. Victoria Hayes haunted his thoughts in ways he could not explain. Her face, during that firing, the genuine confusion and hurt in her eyes, played on repeat in his mind during sleepless nights. On impulse. Julian pulled up the archived files from the Tech Vision deal. He began reading through every document, every email, every report. Hours passed as he dug deeper into the digital trail. Then, buried in a subfolder he had never noticed before, he found it. Victoria's original report, dated 6 weeks before the signing, complete with highlighted warnings about the liability clause and a detailed recommendation to renegotiate. Julian's blood ran cold. The report had been submitted to Gregory Walsh with a flag marked urgent, but Gregory had never forwarded it. In fact, Gregory had created a second sanitized version, removing Victoria's warnings entirely. That was the version Julian had seen, with shaking hands. Julian pulled up Gregory's financial records, something he should have done months ago. The pattern was immediately clear. Large payments from TechVision to an offshore account, deposits that coincided with key decisions about the merger. Gregory had been paid to push the deal through, regardless of the risks. Victoria had been the only obstacle, so Gregory had buried her report and let her take the fall. Julian felt sick. He had destroyed an innocent woman's career based on lies. He had humiliated her publicly, called her incompetent and dangerous, all while the real criminal sat in the executive suite collecting bonuses. The memory of that night they had shared before everything fell apart made his guilt even worse. He had been cold to her the next morning, afraid of his own feelings, of the vulnerability she had stirred in him. Then he had fired her with cruelty he now recognized as monstrous. He immediately launched an internal investigation. Within days, the evidence was overwhelming. Gregory Walsh was arrested for fraud and conspiracy. The news sent shockwaves through the company and the industry. But Julian's only thought was finding Victoria and making things right. The search Julian hired the best private investigator in the city. "Find Victoria Hayes," he ordered. "I do not care what it costs or how long it takes. Find her." The investigator returned 2 weeks later with an address in a modest neighborhood across town. "She works at a bookstore cafe called Chapter and Brew," he reported. "Has been there for about 6 months. Lives alone in a studio apartment nearby." Julian's chest tightened. From senior analyst at a Fortune 500 company to serving coffee in a bookstore, he had done that to her. He had stolen her future because he was too arrogant to question his own CFO, too proud to consider he might be wrong. He tried calling her old number, but it was disconnected. He wrote letters, but they went unanswered. Finally, he decided to go to the cafe himself. He needed to see her face to face, to apologize properly, to offer her everything he should have given her in the first place: her job back, a promotion, compensation for what she had suffered. But when Julian arrived at Chapter and Brew that first time, Victoria was not working the front. He got his coffee from an older woman with knowing eyes who studied him a bit too carefully. He returned 3 more times over the next week, always missing her. The older woman, Martha, began to recognize him. Her friendliness cooled noticeably. On his 5th visit, Julian's frustration boiled over. "Look, I know Victoria Hayes works here. I need to speak with her. It is extremely important." Martha's expression hardened. "Mr. Montgomery, I know exactly who you are. Victoria does not want to see you. You have done enough damage. Please leave her alone." "I was wrong. There was fraud. My CFO set her up. I need to apologize and make things right." "Some things cannot be made right with money and apologies," Martha said coldly. "That girl has built a new life. She does not need you tearing it down again." Julian left frustrated, but not defeated. He would find another way. He had to. The guilt was eating him alive, but more than that, he realized he missed her. The one night they had shared had revealed something real beneath his carefully constructed walls. Victoria had seen him as a man, not just a CEO. She had challenged him intellectually and matched his intensity. Then he had thrown it all away because he was too afraid to be vulnerable. The crisis Victoria was restocking shelves in the back room when the first contraction hit. She gasped, her hand flying to her belly. At 7.5 months pregnant, she still had weeks to go. This could not be labor. Maybe it was just Braxton Hicks. The false contractions her doctor had warned about. But then another wave hit. Stronger this time, and she felt warm liquid running down her legs. Her water had broken. Panic surged through her as she called out for Martha. Martha took one look and sprang into action. "Thomas," she shouted. He had been shelving books in the front. "Call an ambulance. Victoria is in labor." Everything happened in a blur. The ambulance, the rush to the hospital, the doctors explaining that the baby was coming early and there were complications. Victoria's blood pressure was dangerously high. They needed to perform an emergency cesarean section. "Is there someone we should call?" a nurse asked as they prepped her for surgery. The baby's father? Family? Victoria's mind raced. Thomas was in the waiting room, but he was not family. Her parents were gone. And Julian had no idea this baby even existed. As the anesthesia began to take effect, tears streamed down her face. "No one," she whispered. "There is no one." But she was wrong. The confrontation Julian had finally gotten. Victoria's address from a contact at her old apartment building. He arrived at her studio to find it empty. Panicked, he went to Chapter and Brew. The cafe was closed, a handwritten sign on the door reading "Family Emergency." His phone rang. It was the private investigator. "Victoria Hayes was admitted to St. Mary's Hospital 2 hours ago. Emergency situation. That is all I could find out." Julian's heart stopped. Without thinking, he ran to his car and drove to the hospital, breaking every speed limit. He burst into the emergency room, demanding information. At first, they would not tell him anything, patient privacy. But when he explained who he was and that he believed she had no other family, a sympathetic nurse took pity on him. "She is in surgery. Emergency cesarean." The baby was coming early. Julian felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. Baby. Victoria was having a baby. His mind raced back, calculating dates. 8 months since that night they had shared. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He staggered to a chair in the waiting room, his head in his hands. He was going to be a father. And Victoria had gone through this entire pregnancy alone, working in a cafe, struggling financially. All because he had destroyed her life. The guilt was suffocating. Thomas found him there an hour later. "Who are you?" Thomas demanded, his protective instincts flaring. "You cannot be here." "I am Julian Montgomery," he said quietly. "I am Victoria's former employer. I came to apologize. I did not know about the baby." Thomas's eyes widened with recognition and anger. "You are him, the one who did this to her. You need to leave. Now, is it mine?" Julian asked, his voice breaking. "The baby, is it mine?" Thomas hesitated, the truth written plainly on his face. Before either could say more, a doctor emerged. "Family of Victoria Hayes?" Both men stood up. The doctor looked between them, confused. "The surgery went well. Mother and baby are stable. It is a girl, small but healthy. You can see them soon." The beginning of healing Victoria woke slowly, her body heavy and sore. The room came into focus gradually, machines beeping softly around her. A nurse smiled down at her. "Welcome back, Mama. You have a beautiful baby girl. 5 pounds, 2 ounces. She is in the NICU for observation, but the doctor says she is doing wonderfully." Tears filled Victoria's eyes. "Can I see her?" "Soon, but first, you have visitors who have been very worried. Shall I send them in?" Victoria nodded, expecting Martha or maybe Thomas. Instead, when the door opened, Julian Montgomery walked in. She thought she was hallucinating from the medication. He looked terrible, his usually perfect appearance disheveled, his eyes red and exhausted. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, trying to sit up. Julian moved closer, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Victoria, please. I know I have no right to be here. I know you probably hate me. But I found out about the fraud. Gregory set you up. I have been trying to find you for weeks to apologize, Gregory." Her mind struggled to process this. What fraud? He explained everything quickly: the buried report, the offshore payments, Gregory's arrest. With each word, Victoria felt a weight lifting from her chest. She had not been crazy. She had not failed. Someone had deliberately sabotaged her. "I am so sorry," Julian continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I destroyed your life because I was too arrogant to question the people around me. I said terrible things to you. I humiliated you. And then I found out tonight that you were pregnant, that you went through all of this alone." He paused, meeting her eyes. "Is she mine, Victoria? Is that baby girl mine?" Victoria wanted to lie, to protect herself and her daughter from this man who had caused so much pain. But she was tired of secrets. "Yes," she admitted. "That night at the company party, before everything fell apart, I found out I was pregnant 2 months after you fired me. I had no way to reach you, and honestly, I was terrified of how you would react. Julian sank into the chair beside her bed, his face in his hands. A daughter, he breathed. I have a daughter, and I almost missed everything because of my own stupidity. What do you want, Julian? Victoria asked wearily. Why are you really here? He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw genuine vulnerability in his eyes. I want to make things right. I want to give you your career back, compensate you for everything. But more than that, I want to be in my daughter's life, if you will let me. And Victoria, I never stopped thinking about you. That night we shared, it terrified me because it was real. I felt something I had never felt before, and I did not know how to handle it. So I pushed you away. Then, when the crisis happened, my fear turned to anger, and I took it out on you in the most horrible way possible. You think you can just apologize and everything will be fine? Victoria's voice shook with emotion. You destroyed me, Julian. You made me question my own sanity and worth. I lost everything. I know, he said quietly. And I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you give me the chance. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you deserve it. Because our daughter deserves a father who will fight for her and for you. Before Victoria could respond, a nurse wheeled in a small clear bassinet. Inside was the tiniest, most perfect baby girl Victoria had ever seen. Dark wisps of hair, a button nose, tiny fingers curled into fists. Someone wants to meet her mama, the nurse said with a smile. They lifted the baby carefully and placed her in Victoria's arms. The moment was transcendent. Victoria looked down at her daughter and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. Then she looked up and saw Julian's face. He was crying openly and unashamedly, staring at his daughter with a mixture of awe and love and regret. Can I? He asked hesitantly, reaching toward them. Victoria nodded, and carefully, they transferred the baby to Julian's arms. He held her like she was made of glass, his large hands cradling her tiny body. Hello, little one, he whispered. I am your father, and I promise you, I will never let you down the way I let your mother down. I will be better. I will be the man you both deserve. The baby made a small sound, and Julian laughed through his tears. Victoria watched them, her emotions a complicated tangle. She was angry, hurt, and betrayed. But she also saw something genuine in Julian's transformation. Maybe people could change. Maybe mistakes, even terrible ones, could lead to growth. And maybe, just maybe, this little girl had brought them together for a reason. Her name is Sophie, Victoria said softly. Sophie Grace Hayes. Sophie, Julian repeated, looking up at her with hope in his eyes. It is beautiful. She is beautiful. You are both beautiful. Thomas appeared in the doorway at that moment, stopping short when he saw the scene before him. Victoria met his eyes, and in that instant, they both understood. Thomas had been her safe harbor in the storm, her proof that good men existed. She would always care for him. But this man holding her daughter, despite everything, was Sophie's father. They had to find a way forward. The road ahead would not be easy. Trust had to be rebuilt brick by brick. Julian had to prove through actions, not just words, that he had truly changed. Victoria had to learn to forgive, not for him, but for herself and for Sophie. And both of them had to navigate co-parenting while dealing with unresolved feelings that had never really gone away. But as Victoria watched Julian gently rock their daughter, whispering promises to her, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe they could build something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Maybe their story was not about a perfect romance, but about two flawed people learning to be better for the tiny life they had created together. Sophie yawned, a sound so small and perfect that both parents smiled. In that moment, surrounded by the beeping of hospital machines and the uncertainty of the future, they found common ground. Whatever happened between them, this little girl would be loved, protected, and given every opportunity they could provide. It was not the ending Victoria had imagined when she first discovered her pregnancy. It was not the grand romantic gesture from fairy tales, but it was real complicated and filled with possibility. And sometimes, that was enough to start building a new beginning. The end.